The topic this morning is, what does it mean to fail spiritually? And I'm going to read what Swami Kriyanandaji, it's a fairly long passage from the Bhagavad Gita in relation to this topic. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, what happens to one who is unsuccessful in yoga practice, who tries devotedly to meditate, but finds himself unable to bring his mind under control? Does he not become like a riven cloud, scattered and dispersed, unable to find Brahman, and equally unable to return to the delusory world he rejected? Please release me permanently, O Krishna, from these doubts. Who else but you can banish my uncertainty?" The Blessed Lord answered, "O Arjuna, my son, one who performs right action can never be destroyed. Whether in this world or the next, his fate will never be evil. A fallen but sincere yogi gains entry after death into the world of the virtuous. He may remain there for many years. Afterward, he is reborn on earth into a good and prosperous home. On the other hand, he may reincarnate on earth in a family of enlightened yogis. Such a birth in this world, however, is difficult to attain. In his new family, he recovers the yogic discrimination he attained formerly and sets himself with even greater zeal to achieve final spiritual liberation. The power of former yoga practice is sufficient to impel, as it were, the reborn yogi on his upward path. Even one who seeks only a theoretical understanding of yoga is more highly advanced than one who is dedicated to outward scriptural rites. Diligently following his chosen path, in cleansing himself thereby of all karmic debt, the yogi, after many births, attains perfection and enters at last into the supreme beatitude." These beautiful words of sacred scripture from the Lord are very encouraging. And our Guru, Paramahansa Yoganandaji, was always extremely encouraging, supportive on the spiritual path, and he often decried those who called themselves a sinner. One day he was at in the West, in America especially, there's a lot of hellfire and damnation for those who sin. And it's very negative and harsh. And he was at a church one day at someone's invitation, and the minister got up and was preaching hellfire and damnation. And this minister shouted, everyone, get on your knees, you are all sinners." And our Guru Yoganandaji looked around and he said he was the only one who wasn't on his knees. He refused to get on his knees. And it wasn't because he wasn't a sinner and the others were. It was because he told everyone, refuse to acknowledge that you have failed in any way. And there's an interesting story in Swami Kriyanandaji's autobiography, The Path, where he was visiting a man who was a disciple of Yoganandaji, and towards the end of his life, the master asked Swamiji to visit him and just, we could say, his goodbyes. And Swamiji came back and told his guru that this man was expressing some regrets about some mistakes that he had made in his life. And the guru said simply, he shouldn't have said that. And really what he was saying, he should not have been identifying with that, because really we are all free inside. We stumble along the way. And as Yoganandaji put it, a saint is a sinner who never gave up. And on this path of ours, people who are drawn to this path of moksha and liberation, we set the bar very high, which is divine perfection, divine freedom. And when you set the bar very high, you're going to stumble a lot. I had a sort of a mantra for about a year one time. It was a New Year's resolution. And I decided that year I was going to set the bar very high for all my activities. And part of my motto was that if you never fail in life, you're not setting the bar high enough. And so failure is fine. It just means that you've set the bar very high and you have not yet succeeded. And so this should be the attitude of the devotee on the spiritual path. And I see too often people who follow a path of divine perfection, when they stumble and they fail to meet that perfection, they tend to get down on themselves and feel guilty and they feel remorse. And this is something that we just have to get out of. I often say that the greatest skill that you can learn on the spiritual path is simply not learning how to avoid stumbling, because on the way there we stumble a lot. The greatest skill you can learn is how to get back up. Get back up quickly, start charging forward, leave the past behind. As Sri Teshparji said, the past lives of all men are dark with many shames. Begin making a spiritual effort now, and everything in future will improve. Swami Kriyanandaji, towards the end of his life, he told an interesting analogy quite often. And it really, I think, raised a lot of people's hackles, because it was a real challenging thing that he said. He was talking about free will, and he said that we have very, very little free will in the end. He said that if you wake up in the morning and you choose the tie that you're going to wear that day, and you have a choice between a red tie and a blue tie, he said that you don't even have the free will which color you're going to choose. And I have to admit, I reacted to that like, wait a minute, I have more free will than that. And so I thought about it, and I decided, well, if I ever have to wear a tie again, which I probably won't, but if I ever have to choose my ties, I'm going to choose the red one and start to put it on the last second. I was going to switch quickly to the blue one and say, see, I had the free will to change my mind at the end. But in fact, my own nature, my own karmic inclinations are to behave that way and to rebel and to say, see, I told you so. And in the end, I wouldn't have the free will to even do that. But Swamiji did say we do have the free will to choose the most important thing that there is. We have the choice to go towards God or to go away from God. And that obviously is really, in the end, is the only important thing. And he said, yes, we do have the free will to do that. So what are the things that we can do to choose that direction? Because essentially, in the end, we're choosing a direction in life. At every moment, actually, not just as a big long-term trend, but as a short-term action and direction of our desires and our thoughts. So how do we keep turning that direction and changing that direction towards God? Well, there are about 4 main things I'm going to talk about, that if you really focus on these 4, you will find that your life will be continually going in the direction of the divine. And you'll find that if you can do this over the months, over the years, over the course of a lifetime, if this is the pole star of your life, is to be constantly thinking of how do I turn it towards the light, towards the divine, you'll find that you make extraordinary progress in one lifetime if that becomes the focus of your life. The first one is very simply the daily habit of meditation. You'll find that when you meditate morning and evening over the years, and you really make that what your life revolves around, what happens every time you meditate is you change your identification from this little self, desires and attachments, and that I am a sinner and I am small and I'm weak, and you change your identification to your identity with yourself as divine bliss, as one with God. And simply, it's really a change of direction in the spine. You're changing the direction from going down and out into involvement and attachment and bondage, and you're concentrating at the point between the eyebrows, and you're turning your identity and what you identify with as one with the Divine Mother, one with the Infinite. If you do this every day, morning and evening, you'll find that you can change the momentum of lifetimes, because there's a lot of momentum from millions of lifetimes of getting involved in delusion. And so we have a lot of momentum to change. But if you meditate morning and evening, you're going to find that over the days, weeks, and months, that this momentum really starts to change until, as you get further into life, the momentum carries you almost on its own power and energy towards freedom and towards the divine. So that's one thing to do. The other one is service, karma yoga, acting in this life with everything as offering the results to God and not being attached to the results. Nishkam karma, which is simply serving God, serving the Guru. When we do that, we change our identity from this little self, and it becomes expansive. We start seeing God in others, we start seeing God in the universe. We really, again, change that momentum. Swami Kriyanandaji said something very interesting in one of his books about this idea. He was working at a particular test of karma that he was fighting. And it was a test of attachment and involvement in delusion. And he said that at that time, he couldn't overcome it in terms of hand-to-hand combat with that particular karmic pull. But what he did say, he said, in the meantime, what he was doing, because he couldn't overcome it at that time, he was balancing the scales of karma in the other direction by serving God and practicing devotion. And it was interesting that he didn't mention meditation in that regard. And I think it's because this delusion was a very active one, and he needed a very active way of balancing the scales of karma. And he said that over time, by continuing to serve, by continuing to practice devotion, which I'll talk about that a little bit later, he said it started to change the momentum of that karma, and he eventually overcame it. And again, rather than getting down on himself for not being free of that karma, rather than beating himself up every time he stumbled and failed, he simply said, okay, it's the way it is, accept it for now, I'm going to change the momentum, I'm going to change the karmic weight until finally the scales change and it tips the balance and I'm free of that delusion, which he did become free of that in that way. Third way, very simply, is if you accept that this life we are working out past bad karma through the body, through tests, through challenges, and you accept those things as coming from our past and that we need to work certain things out, and at the same time you're not creating new bad karma, you'll find that this also starts to change the balance. Now, this is a lot trickier than it sounds, not creating new karma, because even as we're working out karma, going through, let's say, physical pain or disease, Yogananda says simply the desire and the thought, oh, I don't want this to be happening, I want to be pain-free, I want to be this and that, just that desire, rather than an actual activity to try to change the weight of it through doctors or affirmation, but that desire itself creates more karma. This is what Yoganandaji said about this. He said, karma is best worked out by meeting life's tests cheerfully and courageously. If you still fear something, that karma has not yet been worked out. To dissipate it, don't try to avoid the tests you have to face. Rise above them bravely by dwelling in God's joy within. And again, he's talking about meditation. That's the answer. He says, God's joy within, how do we find that? By meditation. Meditation, in a way, is the key to everything. Because what happens when we practice meditation, we don't necessarily change the karma. At times we can, but it's not the real reason why meditation really changes us. What it does, we change our identity from this little ego to the infinite self. And as Swamiji often used to say, that our karma has to have a post to be tied to, and it's the post of ego. And when we dissolve that post of ego, that karma cannot be binding us anymore. And this is why great saints and masters, when they work out karma, they are inwardly free. They still have to work some karma out. But it doesn't affect them, it doesn't touch them, because it's not yanking on that post of ego that complains and says, oh, ouch, that hurts, I don't like this makes me miserable. Instead, their identity is with divine bliss, the infinite, and they become free inwardly, not necessarily outwardly, but that's, again, the whole point of all this. Now, the last one to really, really work on, is one that Swamiji mentioned in that story that I just told, is the practice of devotion. Devotion is probably the greatest thing that can free us from limitation and bondage. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita said that, worship me, adore me, and you will come to me, and that's all you need to do. In the end, when we practice devotion, again, in yogic scientific terms, very simply what we are doing is we're taking the energy of the heart chakra, that's going down the spine and out into attachment and desire and emotion and engagement and involvement. We're reversing that flow. We're offering it up to the point between the eyebrows, saying, Lord, I am yours. Make me one with thee. I love you. And all you need to do is concentrate your heart's feelings on the Lord, and you start to become lifted up by divine grace. As Swamiji very often said, he said, when you lift one up to God, God lowers two hands to lift you you up. And in the end, we really are only lifted by divine grace. But our part is to enter into that grace, to offer ourselves into that grace, and we will become free in that way. Even the worst sins, the worst failings, the worst actions can be dissolved and overcome simply through devotion. There's a story that our guru, Yoganandaji, used to tell very often, and I bet some of us have probably heard it more than once, but it's a good story and it's a good reminder. It was a story of Narada, who was visiting the earth at the request of the Lord. And he would, as we know, Narada would visit very often just to see how things were going down here, and he would report back to the Lord. And he would also sort of get involved and cause mischief at times. But the Lord said to Narada, go and see how my devotees are doing, and find the most worthy devotee on this earth, and come back to me and report to me. And so Narada went to earth, and he saw this great Himalayan yogi, ascetic, sitting in deep meditation and sitting very still and very advanced and very yogic and very disciplined and focused. And Narada was very impressed. He also saw another man on the way back to tell the Lord about the greatest devotee that he saw. This other man was trying to put a post into a hole, and he was drunk, and he was not very disciplined, and he was trying to put the post in the hole, and he was stumbling around, and he aimed for the hole, and he would miss, and he would take another drink and try to aim for the hole, and he would keep missing, and he would be talking to God the whole time, saying, Lord, why don't you help me with this and that, and so Narada went back to the Lord, told him about the greatest devotee that he saw, which was this great yogi. And the Lord, with a inquisitive mind, you could tell he had something in mind. He said, well, who else did you see? Please tell me what else you saw. And Narada said, oh, I saw this drunk guy putting this post in the hole, and he was talking to you kind of not very respectfully at times, and anyways, there's a lot of people like that on earth, but this other guy was really great. And so the Lord said, I want you to go back, and I want you to give them each a test, just to see. He said, tell them that I will come to them and free them and liberate them as soon as I'm done passing the elephant through an eye of a needle. And Narada was quite impressed and puzzled both by this, and so he went back, and he saw this great Himalayan yogi, very focused and calling to God and ready to be liberated at a moment's notice. And he told this man that he had just talked to the Lord, and the man asked, well, what did he say? And Narada said, he will come to you and free you as soon as he's finished passing an elephant through the eye of a needle. And this ascetic got outraged at that. What do you mean? He's going to come to me after he finishes passing an elephant through the eye of a needle? It's going to take forever. Why is he wasting his time doing that? Why isn't he impressed with my devotion and my discipline? And Narada was starting to get the idea here. So he went to this drunk devotee, trying to put the post in the hole, and he said to this man, who eagerly went to Narada and knew that he had just come from the Lord of the universe, and said, what did the Lord say? What is the Lord doing? And Narada said, the Lord will come to you, free you, and take you into his arms as soon as he's finished passing an elephant through the eye of a needle. And this devotee immediately went into a state of bliss and ecstasy and started chanting God's name and saying, oh, the Lord, he's coming. He's just one moment for him to pass an elephant through the eye of a needle. He's mine. And he went into ecstasy, and he went into divine freedom. And so it's not actions that free us. It's not doing all the right things. It's not necessarily even being disciplined in meditation, although this isn't an excuse to not meditate. But it does say that devotion is the most important thing. That pure devotion of complete self-offering. And you'll find that the techniques of the path of Kriya Yoga are extraordinary tools. As I like to say, they're a technology to help us take this devotion and to be able to offer it and to offer ourselves into divine freedom. In a way, we can't give ourselves to God until we have control over ourselves, over our emotions, over our life force. This is what pranayama is, control of the life force. Yogananda had an affirmation that describes why we have tools and technology in meditation and scientific yoga combined with devotion. It was an affirmation that he wrote. He said, "Teach me to own again, oh own again, my matter-souled mind and brain, that I may give them to thee in meditation and ecstasy, in prayer and reverie." And so these tools of meditation give us the power to become the sons of God through controlling our life force, through being able to offer ourselves. But even when we fail, Yoganandaji had just what I think is a pretty unique perspective in the way he talked to God, because he was very open and honest and frank with the Lord of the universe, not because he was a master, but because he was a child of the infinite. And I'm going to end by reading something that he said about the right way to pray, the right way to practice devotion. This is our Guru speaking. "I sometimes wonder why people thank God for, quote, the gift of life. What kind of gift is that? I tell him, I didn't ask you to create me, but since you've done so, all I ask is release me. Get me out of this mess you've put me in." And he says, "We didn't come into existence because of any grace of his. We are as eternal as he is. The soul is coexistent with spirit. Sometimes I like, lovingly of course, to scold him. Why did you force us to wander about in delusion? He doesn't mind it when I talk to him like that. He has to get us out if we call to him with deep love." So take that sentiment, that feeling, that attitude as divine children, whose our divine birthright is to become free, into your meditation, into your service, and into our daily life. And you will find that even as you affirm that divinity as a child of the infinite, even then you start to feel freer and freer, even in the moment, and you don't have to wait lifetimes for it. May the grace and the blessings of our Gurus be with us always.